out tonight and showing your concern with what we're dealing with here in Putnam County. And for many of us, it started out with Heritage Environmental Services putting in a bid to bring in the toxic waste from East Palestine, Ohio. But as we continue to research, it has become something much more than that. My name is Morgan Myers. I'm a college graduate from Indiana University. I was a United States Marine. And I know what it takes to research and how to continue to fight when you feel like the odds are stacked against you. But out of all the things that I am, the most precious piece of me is that I'm a mother and I'm a concerned citizen who wants to pass on her family farm to fifth generation Putnam County children. And up here, you know, we're not chemists or geologists, and we don't pretend to be, but we're researchers, and we're people who understand the importance of investigating these issues that are in our county. And at the tables over here, you'll see information and ways that you can help in our efforts. And last night, a contact of ours revealed to us some serious information about the water in Bainbridge, Indiana. This person is a hydro and environmental geologist and also a whistleblower. They have stuck their neck out to give us information that is of the utmost importance to the people of this county. And this person showed us cross-section images of Heritage Environmental Services landfill. And when I talk about cross-sections, think of it like cutting a piece of cake. So you cut the piece of cake and you pull it out and you see the different layers in it. So you're looking at it from the side. So in one of these cross-sections, which we have some images that we'll be able to show, you can see how the hazardous waste goes completely into the bedrock, which is directly over the unconsolidated tipped and till aquifer system. There was no barrier and no liner, no clay. We looked at the water flow, and the direction that it is flowing flows directly to the Bainbridge well supply, okay? This is serious. And the Bainbridge water supply pumps 175 gallons per minute. It has a giant pump that pulls that water, and it just so happens to be pulling it right from underneath Heritage Environmental Services. And we're unsure at this time if the well has been completely compromised, but just the potential for it to be contaminated demands action on our part. At 4 p.m. this afternoon, our whistleblowing geologist friend informed us that they would not be coming for fear of their job security, that their job may be at stake today, and they didn't want to be spotted here, which is understandable when you give information like that. We're okay to have them in the background. Can you give me my phone, please? So, with the geologist not being here tonight, I mean, if that doesn't scream volumes to the validity of what we're about to show you this evening, then I don't know what will be, you know. But we're here to tell you that we're just citizens of this community and we don't have all the answers. And we need people like you who are concerned to come in and join the fight. And if it's not us, nobody else loves Putnam County the way we do. If not us, then who?
Now, I don't know about you all, but when I first heard the word aquifer, I was not sure what that meant. Behind Miss Laura here, Laura, if you could point it out, this large yellow area that almost covers the entire top of Putnam County is the tipped and till aquifer. Now, in that left upper corner, a little bit down, that area right there is where Heritage Environmental Services is. Almost their entire industrial acreage sits on top of that aquifer. And if you're not sure what an aquifer is, when the glaciers came down in the Ice Age, they melted, they created a pool of water. That pool of water sunk into the ground. This aquifer is very shallow for most aquifers, and it's also unconsolidated, which means water and material move through it very easily. It's not covered. It's consolidated would mean it has thick layers of clay and rock. This one down to the tributaries below it. The Bainbridge Public Well, which, Laura, if you can point that out on the map, please. It is, I believe it's 137 feet deep. It's 137 feet deep with a pump. So it's pumping all the water from around it. And it's pumping all the water from underneath the landfill. Now, Laura's gonna come up and she's gonna speak a little bit about the history and the timeline. And then after Laura, we're gonna go ahead and have Rudy say a few words, okay? Thank you, guys.
I'd rather talk on lunch. After the, I'm the paper collector here. After the last meeting, and actually prior to that, I had to scratch my head and wonder how we are where we are in 2023. And what happened in the 1980s to allow this to be here in Putnam County. So I went to the Banner Graphic newspaper, which is the newspaper in Greencastle, for those of you who don't know. And I had to go into the archives, which you can find online at the Hoosier State Chronicles. You can go back and find newspapers from all around the state. So I created a timeline, and that timeline is up there on the whiteboard. But when you look at it, and I will run through this, just to give you a little bit of background, the company that was actually the parent for Heritage Environmental Services was called ILWD, Indiana Liquid Waste Disposal Company. And the parent of that company, which was created in 1930, was owned by John Fesenfeld, and it was the Rock Island Refinery and Crystal Flash Petroleum. And he began his business in 1930. In 1965, the Solid Waste Disposal Act, which was a federal law, was passed. In 1970, the EPA was created. In 1972, Indiana Liquid Waste Disposal, ILWD, was created by Fred Fensenfeld and Ken Price. And if you look at the Banner Graphic articles, and I have them in my hand here, they addressed Putnam County officials a lot. They attended a lot of meetings. November 5th, 1980 is when it all started rolling, and two hands. November 5th, 1980, ILWD receives a construction permit from State Environmental Board under the umbrella of the Indiana State Board of Health to landfill oil recycling sludge. In November 13th, 1980, that was when ILWD bought their first land in Putnam County. The deed is recorded on November 13th. Interestingly, Gerald Calvert was the county attorney at the time, and he had notified the federal and state regulators that no zoning was in place for Putnam County. Calvert was fired in 1981 by the commissioners. Yay. Go Commissioners. In December 5th, 1980, the first public meeting in Russellville about the landfill occurred right here. So ILWD people presented their plan, but the approvals were already in place by that time, and they had already bought some of the land. Currently, they own 1,030 acres. I have to look at my spreadsheet, but they own 1,030 acres. They've added to that. In January 19th of 1981, the Putnam County Commissioners passed an ordinance to prohibit construction and disposal of hazardous waste. 29th of January, Northern Putnam County sends a petition that they created with their attorney to submit to the Indiana State Board of Health Environmental Management Board. No action was taken. January 1981, the citizens of the northern townships and their attorney meet with Indiana State Board of Health officials with an independent engineering report, and they ask for more study. It didn't happen. The 3rd of February, 1981, ILWD sues the Putnam County Board of Commissioners because the commissioners had passed an ordinance prohibiting the landfills, the construction of landfills. So ILWD turns around and sues the Putnam County Commissioners. In 15th of April 1981, there was a public hearing on ILWD hazardous waste landfill. Approximately 75 to 90 residents attended. The hearing officer was Mark Richards from the Indiana State Board of Health Environmental Management Board. There was no recording or scribing of that meeting. The only record of it is in the banner graphic. In March to June, somewhere in there, I don't know the exact date, the Owen County Circuit Court rules the commissioner's ordinance is unconstitutional since Putnam County had not adopted zoning. ILWD had requested a change in venue, therefore the case was heard in Owen County. The 2nd of June 1981, the commissioners dropped the ordinance and seek to negotiate the terms of disposal. Later in 1981, construction of the landfill was completed and hazardous waste was accepted. 1984, and I don't have, I stopped because I was blind from cutting and pasting and doing things to get all of these articles, but these articles go on into the 1990s if you wish to do your own research. 1984 was a critical year though, because the federal hazardous solid waste amendments are added to what's called the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. And those amendments defined what was hazardous waste, and ILWD began to accept different kinds of hazardous waste and from other places besides just their own companies that were generating waste. So when they started out in 1981, they told the story, well, we're just gonna, it's really nothing, it's not that big a deal, it's not that toxic. It's ash from our own recycling efforts. And in 1984, because of the federal legislation, then that opened the doors where all of a sudden it was, we can accept waste, hazardous waste from a lot of different places, and it became a money-making effort for ILWD. In August of 1985, ILWD requests National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. It's an NPDES permit to discharge treated stormwater runoff into Raccoon Creek. In October of 1985, local concerns and opposition continued. In 1986, ILWD becomes Heritage Environmental Services, Inc. No change in personnel, they changed their name. It wasn't until July of 1992 that the commissioners of Putnam County adopted zoning. Zoning was the only thing that would have prohibited the building of a landfill. In 1994, the Heritage Group was formed to consolidate all their family-owned businesses under one name. Heritage Environmental Services is owned by the Heritage Group, and there are over 30 different companies that are under the umbrella of the Heritage Group. It is a family-owned company. It was from the get-go, it still is. So getting access to financial records is not as easy as what it would be if it were a publicly owned, publicly traded company. So if you try and research the Heritage Group, I suggest you do, because you'll be amazed at all the different companies that are under their umbrella. They are international now, and it is not uncommon for them to see spin-offs where, okay, we're done with this company, it doesn't fit into our marketing or our strategic plan, and they sell it off. And I'm afraid that that's what may happen to the landfill. I don't think I've ever encountered quite as many acronyms as what the EPA uses. And, you know, when you try and read the documents, there's an acronym here and an acronym there, because the actions that they are referring to are so long that you'd go crazy if you tried to write it out all the time. So they use a lot of acronyms. But one acronym is really important, and that is the RCRA resource. It's the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. It was passed in 1976, and it amended the 1965 Waste Disposal Act. So what happened over time with the federal government is that they amended these laws, rightfully so, to constrain operators more, so that they couldn't just put, you couldn't just throw a landfill in anywhere. So there are now all kinds of constraints on the landfills that were not present when the landfill was built in 1981. I have, for anyone who wants to dig deeper into this, there are lots and lots of pages and pages of documents about what has transpired over time and what is transpiring now with Heritage Environmental Services. On the IDEM website, there is what's called a virtual file cabinet. It's kind of cumbersome to use, but you can search and you can read all of the different requirements and the submissions for permits. For the year 2014, and every 5 years, landfills, hazardous waste landfills, which are called RCRA landfills, have to be re-permitted. So there may be an opportunity every 5 years that we can have an influence on that re-permitting process. I don't know enough about it yet, but we will. But when you go on the IDEM website, for instance, for the 2014 re-permitting, I have like 12 documents that I've got to go through. One of those documents was 528 pages long. So they're full of graphs, they're full of charts, and just plan to spend some time if you want to delve into it. And we welcome anybody who wants to help us all gain more knowledge about that. I do also this gives you an idea, and put it up here as well. These are the parcels that Heritage Environmental Services owns in Putnam County. The curved line down here is the highway, so they are both north and south of the highway. They are all contiguous parcels. This map, this one shows it a little bit better. I think I may have it upside down, that would help. So you guys are welcome to look at those. And I also have the land records for all of those parcels. One thing that I did learn, and for those of you who were here on the 1st of March, in my reading, can I read this to them? This is actually part of the permit to allow them to be recertified to operate, and this is from 2014. Heritage Environmental Services, LLC, owns and operates a Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, Subtitle C, permitted hazardous waste disposal facility, gives the number, located in northwestern Putnam County, Indiana, near the town of Roachdale. The facility consists of 2 disposal units, Unit 1 and Unit 2. Unit 1 was originally permitted by the Indiana State Board of Health in November 1980 and began operations in June 1981. Operations at this unit continue as of the date of this document and are expected to be complete by the end of 2008. Unit 1 consists of 2 phases of development. Unit 2, which is what is being filled now, was permitted under the terms of a Class 3 modification issued in August 2004. Development of the initial disposal cell at Unit 2 commenced operation in December 2007. The first 4 cells, and this is really important, the first 4 cells constructed at Unit 1 are based in excavated soils with granular leachate collection systems. Design and construction of these cells were completed prior to enactment of the Hazardous and Solid Waste Amendments of 1984. Thus, no synthetic liners or leak detection systems were required, other than ground monitoring systems. Beginning with cell T5 of Unit 1, the design was modified to comply with HSWA, including 30 mil PVC primary and secondary liners, a leachate collection and removal system, and a leak detection system between the liners. That's not exactly what we were told March 1st. And as you're coming west on 236, Unit 1 is the land that's closest to the creek there. It's just right, it's between the county road and the creek. Unit 2 is on the west side of the county road. Thank y'all.
We actually had the hydro environmental geologist review. From that information is where we were able to learn about the well, as well as these maps that we have. They'll be available over on the table for you guys to look at. This all comes off the permitting. Also, Morgan went to the North Putnam. Oh, okay. So Laura also went to the health department for Putnam County just last week and requested the documents for the testing that they have to do only twice a year. When asking for this testing, and they wanted it from the beginning to the end, which should have started about 1980, they had lost everything prior to 2014. The re-permitting to make them a subtitle C and D, which is just states what kind of material they can bring into their landfill, was in 2014. So all that information is now lost from the county. Also, I want to take a minute to talk about how they do these samplings. I know that we lost a lot of people's interest tonight when the EPA announced that they were no longer going to allow states to block the shipments coming in from Ohio to the hazardous landfills. But, and Rudy, you may be able to help me on this topic. You're a little bit more familiar with it than I am. When they take those samples, if you dump a bottle of water on the floor, it's going to spill out, but there's going to be a part right in the middle that it's going to be the wettest, and then it's going to get drier and drier as it spills out. If you take a sample from the outside of that, just one sample, it is not going to be reflective of how much water is really in that area, because this over here is deeper. So the dioxins that they have tested for, I want you guys to keep that in mind. They have said that the sample that they have tested is at the acceptable rate, which I'm sure Rudy will get into the acceptable risk, acceptable rate game there. But keep that in mind when you are reading articles about getting this information back and the testing from it. Morgan, do you have anything to add on that?
Just think about it like a grid, right? Whenever, if you're looking down, you think about a grid, and there's going to be certain hot spots where these chemicals would be. Do you really think they're picking from the straight hot spot, or do you think they're picking from the less contaminated area?
Also with that, with the leachate, if I'm saying that correctly, they actually, Heritage actually had a document that they, about the leachate draining into Raccoon Creek. And they had to give them sampling of how much leachate was getting dumped into Raccoon Creek.
That was interesting.
That was very interesting.
And
go ahead.
some of those banner graphic articles, they state that as well.
And also, we do on our reference paper have the link there also to go look at those articles as well. Now I'm gonna go ahead and ask Rudy to come up and speak, and he'll get into his specialty.
Surreal, because I don't want to be here. And I know none of you want to be here. I want to be with my 8-year-old, my 2-month-year-old, and my 16, 14, 12-year-old, my wife. But what's happening is it's an environmental abomination. It's horrific. It is something that goes deep and is a long narrative. And fortunately, there are people who have gone way before us who have laid out a map for understanding, you know, as Lori said, so many of these acronyms that we get lost in. Well, that's actually part of the game in hiding and covering up the most lethal compound. Again, I know a lot of people don't want to talk about dioxin. And I hear in the hardware store, I hear out when I'm at Casey's, and I start talking to people because that's just me. Hey, have you heard this? Have you heard that? And what I hear, maybe many of you have heard, well, you know, they've been dumping stuff in there for 40 years, just as bad. No, they haven't. They haven't been dumping stuff in there. Well, one gentleman said, they've been dumping more stuff in there. No, they haven't, sir. Because what we're talking about is a classification of chemical compounds that is, you know, we all use the definitive article now and then to kind of exaggerate for effect. That was the best ice cream sandwich I ever had in my life. We all know that you don't really mean that. It's a way of communication, right? But we're not exaggerating, okay? Dioxins, 2378-TCDD, all right, and its family of compounds is that's the definitive article, the most toxic man-made substance that we know of. And there are probably a catalog of roughly 500 very deadly, cancer-causing, man-made compounds. That's at the top of the list. It's the worst. And so, yes, has Heritage Environmental probably been taking dioxin-based material years ago? I mean, if I had to bet $5, I'd say probably. But the volume and the amount and the specific concentration that is coming from East Palestine is is horrendous. And for those of you who've looked into this and who've studied this, there are valleys in Oregon that have been dearth of childbearing for 50 years because of excessive Agent Orange spraying, okay? This is a reality that in 10, 15, 20 years, people will look back and say, oh my goodness, why didn't more people stand up and get concerned about this? And this is why Robert Allen wrote the book in 2004, Dioxin, the Perfect Poison, okay? Dioxin, Truth and Lies About Dioxin and the Perfect Poison. It's because it's a delayed toxin, okay? In high concentrations, of course, we know very well, people can get chloracne, people can have all sorts of flu-like symptoms, but it's the years, the months, and especially with lower body mass, like children and animals, those results are pernicious. And so I'm not here to regurgitate all of that. I just want to echo that I am so thankful that there are people out here that are concerned and that are intolerant of what's been going on since 1981, but now is being exacerbated almost to a level of gross neglect and arrogance beyond what someone could recognize. A couple more things, and then I want us to get back to what these ladies have planned, and they've done a lot of hard work for this evening. One is this. I believe it was Harry Truman said that we accomplish more when we aren't concerned with who gets the credit. All right? There are a lot of fronts in a war, okay? There are aerial assaults, there are ground assaults, there's covert operations, if you're just looking at military history, all right? So we have a number of avenues that are already kind of moving, all right, that already have feet on them. There is a very deep and very needy historical comprehension of what has gone on with Heritage Environmental. That is extremely important because one of the avenues that we have to defeat this is through litigation. And if I can speak very honestly, some of the things that we were told by Heritage Environmental executives were just outright lies. Dirty, rotten, low-down lies. Now, in a court of law, they would use the word prevarication, obfuscation, etc. But they were lies, okay? When they were asked directly about dioxin, there was direct obfuscation and ignoring of questions. When they were asked about liners, there was direct obfuscation and ignoring of questions, all right? When they were asked about permitting and asked about problems that they had with EPA violations, they said, just a little labeling error, okay? Well, yeah, if you own a barber shop and you label $5 haircut instead of $7, that's a labeling error, no big deal. When your business is based off of hazardous material, labeling is everything, okay? So if this gentleman thinks the people of Putnam County are foolish, he has other things coming for him. But litigation, that's one area that is being investigated and should be completely investigated. And all of the people who are involved with that, we should support them and help them. Another area is the area of zoning and local political action, okay? I'm going to give you a phone number before I sit down momentarily in a few minutes, by which if anyone is interested in running for a local office, I want you to text the word election to the number that I'm going to give you. Because the county commissioners, their role and responsibility is to protect and to serve, and if you read their job description, they are in utter neglect and violation of taking serious concern for what is going on in their county, in the drinking water, in the land, in their county. It's unacceptable. Zoning boards, everything possible, full frontal assault, and this was the question that I asked them, and I told them that when I returned to their county commissioner meeting, I was going to ask, what have you done from a full court press perspective to try to stop this? This is what we need done, and we need people who are willing to say, we're going to do everything in our power to stop this, all right? So litigation, local government. We also need, quite frankly, just continued visibility on this issue, because many people just don't understand how serious this issue is and how it can affect fertility and how it can affect cancers and all sorts of other pernicious problems. We need to continue to get that word out. And so my biggest message is continue to fight, don't infight, and continue to support all wise and fruitful methods to stop this. Because at the end of the day, I think what all of our desire is that Heritage Environmental will have to be shut down and have to be professionally decommissioned. And then we'll have to have professional hydrogeologists come in and find a way to remediate this and get this out of this area, okay? There are whistleblowing laws that defend and help people who are in the position that our friend is in, so we should encourage them to do that as well. And all of you who know people who used to work at Heritage Environmental, encourage them to reach out to the correct source and to give information that can help us together stop the absurdity of dumping the most toxic man-made compound known to humans literally miles from here on top of a shallow, unconsolidated aquifer. And if anyone's taken even 30 minutes to try to understand hydrogeology and watersheds and water tables, it is stunningly complex. Even the spin of the earth and the Coriolis effect affects the way water moves below the earth's surface. And so for people who think, oh, it's just Putnam County, no, it is not just Putnam County. And as I have shown, and I have yet to someone prove me incorrectly, there's also a strong correlation with that leachate going into the Indianapolis Morris Street facility. And I've had a friend who is a fireman give me horror stories of his experience with the Morris Street facility over the 2 decades that he's been a fireman in that area. So, to wrap this up, I want to give you a phone number. If we have a board someplace, somewhere to write that on, I'll also write that.
We can make that available over at the table.
We'll make that available, but if anyone's recording or listening, text the word election to 260-693-7334. And fortunately, we can get you in touch with someone who is phenomenal in this area and who can help put together a team, okay, not an individual, a group, a team of people who are going to say, yeah, we're not going to tolerate complete and utter inactivity in a job that you are paid to protect and to help the people of the county. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Lori, for all the research you've done. It's been stunning and amazing. And Morgan and Catherine, just amazing all the work you've done. And I know they have a lot more. Appreciate it.
Just to recap, this is a lot of information. So just to recap what we've learned tonight. We've learned that this county has had concerns over the landfill since they began and since they started. We've learned that their first 4 cells, which is where they're dumping the hazardous waste, has no liner. We do know that leachate is getting into Raccoon Creek, and we know that the water that is underneath the landfill is going to the Bainbridge Public Service well. How do we stop this? We stop this by voting in the zoning. We have a list of all the county meetings coming up, and anything that would pertain to this issue, we have handouts with the meeting schedule on it.
Yes, be there as much as you can possibly be. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Right.
So if we are constantly there, they'll know that we're watching, and they'll know that their elections.
Go ahead, Lori. Laura, sorry.
With regard to zoning of those parcels, any of the parcels which were purchased by either ILWD or Heritage Environmental Services prior to 1992 when zoning was adopted by the commissioners, those parcels are automatically considered to be industrial in their zoning classification. Only the parcels that were purchased after 1992 are subject to zoning, and that's not very many of them. Some of the parcels, either one entity or the other, ILWD, had rezoned to industrial prior to the adoption of zoning. So there's not a lot that we can do in the way of having an influence with zoning, except for some of the parcels I believe that are south of the highway. I just got the information this afternoon and I haven't plotted it on the GIS system, but just an FYI, a lot of it's not going to be a zoning issue.
And if I can jump in, this is a perfect situation. This is a perfect case scenario where zoning, okay, when we're looking at the different fronts of a battle, zoning for this particular issue may not be capable of stopping what we all want to be stopped. Litigation, however, does have cease and desist and decommission histories when there are known safety and health hazards. So when you hear that, don't be hopeless and think, well, because we can't fix it in zoning, we can't fix it otherwise. Like I said, many different fronts in this battle, and we need to kind of do a full-fledged approach in as many as we can.
If there are specific laws that pertain to the protection of public wells, public supply wells, and so by having the Bay Bridge wells, there are two of them, I believe, where they are, that can allow a certain increased impact, if you will, from a legal standpoint, and perhaps it can be done faster than just waiting for Heritage Environmental Services to go through a re-permitting process. The permitting process is basically what they have to go through in order to give them license to continue their operations. And that does involve public hearings, and the opportunity for public input, in addition to what Rudy is suggesting in the way of legal action.
Kind of touching on the legal action thing, so looking at it from just somebody who lives here, and, you know, just blue collar working people, we're basically fighting a battle against a multi-million-dollar company. They've got more money than all of us together putting this running, so taking any type of legal action, who do we need to get in our corner to help kind of support the lack of finances that we have in order to fight this fight?
That's a fantastic question. Number one, we need to come together and show our government officials that we do have concerns, because that's exactly where they need to step in and step up. Also as well, there is a likelihood that Watts and Lindenberg, the law office that Aaron Brockovich works with, does have their eye on Putnam County. I have been in contact with them, and it is currently something that they're looking at, but right now their focus is on East Palestine.
So that's a great question, sir, because this is where, in that area of finding someone who will review all of the wonderful research that Laura has done and that we have here, etc., some of that is going to require that we continue to beat the drum. And the reality is that drum is, in our current era, most likely a social media, an alternative media, because Channel 13, Channel 8, Fox, all these others are tending to not take the full picture to the public eye. When I spoke with Logan Gay for 30 minutes on the phone, and I explained to her the leachate connection, she literally lost her words. Her eyes got glassy. She got a little plush. She's a very nice African-American, light-skinned lady, but I could see still the blood rushing to her face. Like, she was completely blown away. She was stuttering. I had to kind of help her continue on in the interview because she understood the severity of what's happening when, in heavy rains, 4 to 5 truckloads of leachate are taken to the Indianapolis Moore Street facility, and 2 ex-workers, I talked to them both directly, confirmed that once heavy metal and pH tests are run, if they pass that, one gentleman said, I actually turned the valve to release the leachate directly into the system that went into the Indianapolis sewage system, which we know eventually, theoretically, I'm not sure exactly where it happens, is filtered and turns back into drinking water, or is exited into the White River. So the point being is, those media outlets are not going to necessarily probably be our friend, but we need to find as many as we can to keep this drum beating heavily, because then the Aaron Brockovitzes are going to say, yeah, that's actually pretty concerning what's going on in Putnam County. Let's also spend some time helping those people out.
I also think in the meantime, while we're waiting for the legal activity to catch up to this craziness, I think that we could be advocating to protect the people of Bainbridge and advocate to move the well. And also advocate to put in a sentinel well in between from Heritage Environmental Services and the main well to say, let's look at that there to make sure that we can find what's wrong, find something before it gets to the Bainbridge.
That's what I was gonna ask, is what would be the process that you would need to go through with the Bainbridge has commissioners?
Town board.
Okay, are they aware of this?
I hope they are after today.
We're gonna need to reach out to them, that's for sure what we,
I did. A couple of the town council members are on vacation for spring break, it's spring break week. I did speak to Bobby Bowler at the Bainbridge town office, and she was trying to reach out to, they have a board, a water board, they do other things too, but she was going to try and reach them, but it was very short notice, and, but I let her know that they need to be concerned.
Along with Newport, because Newport's well system pulls off of this water tank.
Right. And it goes up into Montgomery County as well, yeah.
we just found out last night.
Well, except that Heritage disposes of some of Newport's waste.
One moment, just to hit on what Rudy was saying a little bit about the media. The media does not want to give this any coverage. A lot of this information, you are getting mixed messages from articles that are being published or from the news sources that we watch. And then you are going over to other social platforms and you're getting eyewitness accounts and a lot of other information that's not being said and not being covered. Even Facebook has been buffering what we're putting out on our group, and even with the event that was shared on Facebook tonight, it was removed for certain reasons. There was time changing on it, which only 2 people had access to the event in order to change that, but yet there was a time difference on it. It is trying to be.
We're feeling like we're being suppressed
Yes.
online about this issue.
News channel, I'm not sure, I think Jennifer King, last Wednesday, at our Aspen, over here at Aspen program over at the church, was there talking to parents to see what they thought.
The problem is they're not reporting on the truth. It took them, from day one, I had talked to them about dioxins. They wouldn't even use the word until Holcomb had used the word in his statement, saying that he was going to make sure that we could reassure the people of Indiana that there were no harmful levels of dioxins, which right there, if you have a 3rd grade reading level, you know that he's telling you, oh, there are probably going to be levels, but they won't be, quote, harmful, and we're going to, quote, reassure you, instead of saying, we're going to find out what's there. So that's the kind of navigation we have to do.
Sir, you.
Yeah, just want to make sure I understood correctly. So unit 1 does not have the PVC line. Is that correct?
The first 4 units of Unit 1 do not have a PVC liner. They have a clay liner system. I do not know the depth of that and what was required in 1980.
They are putting the soil from East Palestine into those?
No,
Okay, that's unit 2.
that is correct.
Okay,
Right,
it's
right,
a little mixed up.
right. Unit,
You are telling me the soil is in unit 2 that does have the PVC line.
right.
Correct.
Unit 1 is closed. So think of it as a waste cemetery. It's there forever and ever and ever. And
Separate beach issue, unit 1.
Correct.
We're concerned about the beach issue. Unit 2 is the dioxin issue. I take it, we're worried about the dioxins that are getting dumped in the soil of unit 2, is that correct?
My source told me did not distinguish between leachate collection from Unit 1 and Unit 2. That's a good semantical distinction that I don't know of, but it would,
but
anything this horrific, one would, you stop the press and figure that exact thing out.
They say that lighters last forever, nothing's forever.
And the dioxin levels, now you're looking towards, I think there are a couple of private testing going on right now, Newsweek one. I think I saw someone come out and said they found, they did some private testing on the soils of East Palestine, coming out with 700 parts per billion. Does that sound? Have you heard anything about the actual dioxin levels?
Well, 40 parts per trillion is completely unacceptable, and what was displayed, this again, unless you study this issue, you won't know it. Typically, compounds are communicated in ppb, parts per billion. However, because dioxin is so lethal, so toxic, according to EPA documents, which is even underestimated 1 million times more than arsenic, it is measured in parts per trillion. And according to 1994 EPA standards, no levels of dioxin were acceptable. If any dioxins were discovered, that was red flag, bad, remediate, decommission. And now they're trying to say, and this goes deep and political with a big financial tag to it, as they had mentioned with Heritage Group. Now they're saying, oh, the EPA accepts these levels.
But you don't know the third party that, besides Case, is there any other?
yes, there are. There are, yes.
And are their results out yet, or are they?
I don't know if they have been utilized, but there are independent labs besides Pace.
But you're asking that have tested. You're asking, sir, if there are other independent labs who are testing, correct? Not that we're aware of.
We don't know.
So is it important that we find out who the independents are?
Well, yes, and there's another vein, and this is a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. I have a gentleman, a friend who has a very wealthy friend who says, I am willing to foot the bill, because he uses testing facilities in Germany. I'm willing to foot the bill for testing to be done in this area because he does not live too far and is concerned about the water situation. And the last thing I'll say is part of the trickery behind this is knowledge. And so when we talk to our friends and family, we have to continue to remind them in this kind of a testing situation, not only are 3 independent labs required as standard operating procedure, but there should be citizen witnessed and videographer testimony of where the samples were taken and even backup samples. Like, this is so far beyond one Pace Labs who purchased Heritage Lab Group. So,
And then just my final one is, have we got an official contact at the environmental manager? In other words, you know, when you look at the site, the part of the contract is with the people of the state of Putnam County, represented by, I guess, they're the party on the contract, the opposite of Heritage Environmental. So what does IDEM say, like, hey, would you come out and sit, you know, without a warrant?
I have,
So, I contacted them, and they referred me to the EPA. I was given 7 different numbers for the EPA. Every single contact at the EPA said, we cannot help you. Here, try this number. Here, try this person. And finally, I told our story and got the pity of someone who did give me a contact at central office. This lady did call me back a week later, which I was shocked that someone finally, after trying 7 times, called me back. I asked her why, given the historical standard protocol, disposing of dioxins, you're required to have an incinerator for that. There are some other acceptable methods involving other chemicals as a way to dispose of it, but landfill is not listed. And I read, even for the CDC's page, if you Google it, CDC recommendations for disposal of dioxin, right? Landfill is nowhere on that list. And when I asked her on the phone, so if that's the historical protocol, is incineration within 17 miles, I believe that's correct, of the site, why is that, what makes Putnam County different? Why is this being treated differently here? And she said, I don't have an answer for that question. And I said, do you understand how that is hugely problematic that someone at the EPA central office can't answer a very simple question, which is why is the process of dioxin disposal being treated so differently in Putnam County, Indiana? And they can't answer. She wanted to send me an email from the IDEM website. Well, it's front page of the IDEM website, just go there. It'll answer all your questions. I said, with all due respect, ma'am, I've already read that. It does not answer my question. I said, can you please, and I told Morgan's story of being a veteran and everything she has gone through, surviving cancer, during her time serving abroad, to now have this happen, to try to get some pity or something. I said, can you please? I said, no one wants to listen to us. No one wants to help us. She said, I'll forward that to a superior. She did forward me the list of kind of resources for it. Again, none of it answered my question, and it's never, I would never get back to my superior.
unhelpful.
I
No,
that's a joke.
I'm gonna disagree with that. And I'm not disagreeing with you because it is a maze. It's like a rat maze to try and figure out who you need to talk
And I'm not saying
to.
the representatives you talk to on the phone are unsympathetic. They just feel like they don't know how to help you.
I did make contact. I had to call multiple times. I left multiple messages and they got back. Every single message that I left, they responded to. One lady, what I found is that some of the state employees work remotely, maybe Monday and Friday, and then they're in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or whatever. I'm not sure how that schedule works, but they're not all in one place at one time like we think of them. So they may be working remotely in, one person who called me back was way up at Chesterton, Indiana. But they did call me back. I do have their emails, and probably the best way to respond or ask your questions is if you can go to the directory of IDEM and find out what the job titles are and email them, because they will respond to you.
Here's a question, I'm sorry. somebody at IDEM should go, okay, so it appears we potentially have a violation. Who in IDEM is responsible to make sure that this person you contract with is meeting the letter of the law of contract? And so I'm just trying to understand, hey, first of all, you gotta haul them out here in front of everybody, but essentially, everyone's gonna be throwing tennis balls. Hey, go chase this tennis ball, go chase that tennis ball, and we run after them. And that's what they just want you to give up. And so, the real point is somebody in IDEM is really responsible for saying, I have a heritage contract, they're out of compliance, we enforce penalties and punishment. And then we found out who that is.
Well, if you go on and do some searching on the IDEM, the Indiana Department of Environmental Management website, in 1990, and it's not humorous, but I thought it was a little humorous when I found it, the state of Indiana sued IDEM, and then a couple of months later, it was for violations of the methodology for handling hazardous waste. And it was not, I don't know, maybe 2 months later, then IDEM, or Heritage Environmental, turns around and sues the state of Indiana. And then they came together to resolve things. But you're not wrong. I mean, someone needs to file complaints, file concerns with IDEM besides just the generalized number that they give you for all complaints. And that would be, I went to the geology section because of my concern about water. I also went to the Division of Water, which is a part of the DNR, as is IDEM. And the Division of Water people were extremely helpful. So they know their stuff. I mean, these are professionals. It's just, as you said, getting to the right person and then following up.
Sir, what is your first name? Rick. So, Rick, I think probably a good outcome is that we post on the Facebook page, the Stop Toxic Dioxins in Indiana Facebook page. Maybe we post some rough minutes or actionable outcomes, giving you information. Like, let's say we determine, oh, this is the exact individual at IDEM who manages, because as you said, they divide all of their contracts up into people, alphabetical, whatever. Someone manages the heritage contract. Let's find who that decision maker is, and then let's hold them accountable. I think that's an action that we could probably...
It's not a contract. It's,
relationship or oversight.
No, it's oversight. It's the permit. Who oversees the permit and the requirements that are set forth from the EPA.
Perfect.
Speaking of being the watchful eye, basically, we have some papers over here that talk about the Hoosier River Watch, where people like us can go and get certified. They're having courses in April to go get certified to test our streams and our waterways. And then we can upload the data into these systems and it'd be part of the data from across Indiana. And I think that's a good way for us to start. It may not be, we're not all chemists or scientists here looking for the hazardous waste like we would love to be testing for by ourselves out there, but I feel like it could be the beginning in a way for them to see that, hey, we're watching you and we're in the streams and we're checking the water. So if you guys are interested in that, you should go sign up for a course.
Morgan, just to hit on I'm so sorry, ma'am, we'll get to you in a moment. Just to hit on what you are saying about the water testing, we did find out that originally, now it's not confirmed that they are still testing this way, but
they were using a bale testing.
The bale testing, Heritage Environmental was using bale testing to test the water, which is basically essentially, you throw down a bucket, it splashes the water. Well, if you splash water, that's not going to give you a proper result. And then as you bring that up and it hits the air, that's not going to give you a proper result.
It disperses even more, the chemical disperses even more. And then when you pour pour it into another cup that disperses the chemical even more, so.
So even the sampling and the tests that we have, there is a level there that is a little bit.
The testing, and we haven't gone to to look all the way at today's documents, but we're hoping that the testing will have evolved, because that old testing seems antiquated. And don't forget to sign up, to sign the sheet and everything whenever you guys came in here. Go ahead.
Do you know if this is the first time that Heritage has ever stored dioxin waste?
We
don't know.
No, we don't know. We're just.
So I'm
They
wondering.
have an incinerator under the suite of Heritage Environmental Services. They do have incineration services, I believe, in Ohio, which again is why.
Which I'm curious, because if the Bainbridge water supply is contaminated, I'm wondering, could there be dioxins in the water?
Well, and that is the interesting issue for Bainbridge. What we need to do is we need to get these test results that they've been testing for, see all of the lab results, not just the bare minimum. We need to see the full spectrum of what they've been testing for. And then we need to go, okay, now here's the possibility of what it could have in there from it coming from underneath Heritage Environmental Services. And so we can see the full spectrum of what could possibly be going on there.
Kind of touching on the water testing, when you buy a new home in Putnam County or pretty much anywhere, you have to have a water sample. So I would assume they would test for generally the same thing, tell you if your drinking water is good, if it's bad.
That's going to be like one of those kits that you could buy on Amazon for $25 or get at Lowe's. That's going to talk about different hardness and softness, but none of the toxic, like those toxic compounds, and specifically the whole family of dioxins is a very specialized mass spectrometer type test that's expensive, and a lot of these outfits can't do, and so it would have to be specialized testing for those things that we suspect.
It also doesn't include testing for heavy metals, which is really, really important. And your homeowner's testing is going to involve testing for bacterial contamination, and that's about the extent of it. Perhaps nitrates from fertilizers that may have gotten into your well, but the kind of testing for hazardous waste is much more extensive, and extensive with a T and expensive with a P.
I actually have a pamphlet over there that I printed off today from the 2020 Bainbridge testing outcomes, and it shows on there what they're testing for.
With regard to the testing and kind of the IBN, to bring it back there, again, I have a contact who reached out to actually a neighbor that he had that was an IBN scientist, recently retired, and his attitude was, Heritage is a good operator, they're very trustworthy. He said that the dioxin testing that was recently done was purely to appease the citizens, that they're going to find that everything is in order, all permits are good, everything is safe, and this is all going to blow over very soon.
Yeah, and if you look at the history, ma'am, that fits exactly. If you, one of the websites I'm going to give you is Eric Coppolino, if you've heard of that name. He has documented for almost 4 decades, for 39 years, the history of deception and placation that takes place around dioxin. And you might say, well, why? Why is that chemical so special? Money. That's why. Because this chemical is so deadly, is so horrific, is so long lasting, that when it is honestly discovered and found, we're talking decommissioning, okay? So now a Heritage is gonna have to think, wow, this multi-billion-dollar facility we have in Russellville, who's bringing a lot of profits to us, that would have to be decommissioned because, as this lady said, dioxins are not allowed to go into a landfill. This is why the trail is so nebulous and dark, because of money, and this is why we have to stay vigilant.
What I don't understand is if this is so safe to come in here, why can't they keep it over there?
But, you know, it's interesting that the EPA has their set standard, and when the EPA standard is different to us, because we're the ones who are facing the long-term exposure. So it's intolerable to us, but.
We're gonna go ahead and dismiss you guys to come down and look at some of the documents we have, and then if you have questions, you can come and speak with us individually. It's getting a little late, and I know some people have to go.
If you haven't jumped on, I can't believe I'm promoting Facebook, but if you haven't jumped on Facebook, jump on, and the Stop Toxic Dioxin group is where we communicate a lot of information, at least we try to when it's not suppressed. It's a powerful source that we should use to connect, and it's a real source. So.
And also make sure you sign in and put your email address and your phone number so we can all continue to contact each other in forms outside of Facebook. So we can, you know, because not everybody has Facebook here, I know that. So we need to be having more meetings like this, and so we can do updates on what's going on and get people together.
One thing is for sure is that every day that we have been researching this, we are finding something new, something wrong, something not okay. We cannot quit talking about this. We cannot quit asking about it, and we cannot quit putting pressure on this, because if we go quiet, then they go along with business.
Can I just ask one thing before everybody, are they done bringing in the trucks?
No, ma'am, they are bringing in 2,000 gallons of soil?
No,
Tons, 2,000 tons, sorry.
Big semi-dump trailers.
Initially, it was roughly 100 semis, but I would,
Where are they on the number?
I don't
I guess
know.
it doesn't really matter when they dump the first one.
Because the other day we're gonna have to work out.
You guys are dismissed now to go and look at the research.
Going back.